Hello and welcome, this is Beriathan of the Citadel Guard of Gondor, and today we will be taking a look at the proposed Warden changes that were released on Bullroarer for beta testing last week. As I told you before, I am going to be as thorough as I can in reviewing these changes, but please keep in mind, this is the first time I do this kind of videos, so any ideas you have on how to improve them on the future would be, of course, welcome. But with that out of the way, here we have, first of all, the notes that you can find on the forums, but on McMahon, the dev in charge of these Warden changes. Most of this had already been published in the developer diary and on previous forum posts, but here we have a full list of what's coming with the Warden for update 35. However, before we start looking at the notes on this Bullroarer preview, I would like to go back to the initial dev diary published by On McMahon, specifically to this note in here. Finally, a note about Wardens leveling up for the first time. We're planning to reinstate the leveling paradigm for Wardens, in which you start off with access to only 2 length Gambits, later unlocking 3 length, then 4 length, then 5 length Gambits. This will have no impact on any Warden already over level 50, but will hopefully help making learning the class a little more manageable for those stepping into it with little prior knowledge of the class or specific Gambits. So, we're gonna take a quick look at exactly how this works, which skills you unlock at which levels, and at which levels you also start unlocking your new length Gambits. Alright, so starting up, a brand new level 1 Warden will begin with its 3 builders, the Gambit default, and 3 Gambits. It would have Deft Strike, Defensive Strike, and Goad. And starting at level 2, you will start gaining new skills and Gambit, beginning with Hampering Javelin at level 2, Ambush at level 5, Impressive Flourish and Persevere both at level 5 as well. And we have Offensive Strike and the Boot at level 3. That is, of course, supposing you do the intro in Archet or start playing with Before the Shadow. But if you get, for example, the veteran status from the LOTRO store, that will level you up automatically to level 5 and you will gain all those automatically. Then moving on, here we have some of the basic skills that you can start earning past level 5. We have Recovery at level 10. As you can see here, all the masteries are unlocked at level 24. And then Quick Recovery starts, well, it's unlocked at level 25. Kinda curious how you get recovery before Quick Recovery, but then again, if you with only 2 Gambits are doing some clearing up, might as well start from scratch, you don't lose much. So in a way, it does make sense for Quick Recovery to be unlocked after Recovery. Anyway, moving on, we have your stances in the Fray and Assailment. You unlock them both at level 10. Here we have some more general skills. Careful Step, Forced March at level 14, First Aid at level 16, Shield Slam and Steadfast at level 20, Battle Preparation level 24, Battle Memory and Never Surrender at level 38. Now, since you unlock both stances at level 10, all the ranged versions of the Gambits you already know about level 10 are all unlocked when you hit level 10 as well. So we have Precise Throw, Ranged Boot, Ranged Deft Strike, Ranged Offensive Strike, and Ranged Persevere, all at level 10. Then we have Ranged Combination Strike, Ranged Power Attack at level 12, Ranged Safeguard at level 14, Piercing Toss at level 16, Reddit Blade at level 18. This is a sort of new Gambit. As far as I remember, this Gambit already existed, but was removed with the previous Warden rework done during the release of Helm's Deep. Same with Shield App, which is another Gambit you unlock at level 18. Same idea, it existed before, was removed with Helm's Deep. We have Range Fear's Resolve and Range Reversal at level 20. Deflection, likewise, another Gambit that existed previously and was removed with Helm's Deep, unlocked at level 22 alongside Ranged Onslaught, Range Boar's Rush at level 25, Range Mighty Blow at level 25 as well, Javelin of Virtue, Range Resounding Challenge at level 27, Shield Mastery at level 30 alongside Shield Tactics, which also comes at level 30. These two Gambits were previously exclusive to the Determination specialization, the blue line, but are no longer exclusive to that line. Moving on, we have Ranged Adroit Maneuver and Ranged Wall of Steel at level 32, Range Resolution at level 34, Range Celebration of Skill at level 36, Range Unerring Strike at level 40, Ranged Warden's Triumph at level 42, Range Dark Before the Dawn at level 44, Range Restoration level 45, Range Cauterizing Steel, which is a new Gambit introduced with this update. You gain it at level 47. Javelin of Fate, a new Gambit introduced as well at level 48. Ranged Unseen Strikes, another new Gambit that you get at level 49. And finally, Ranged Exaltation of Battle that you get at level 50. Now, moving on with the melee Gambits, we have a Reversal at level 20. Well, there's also a ranged version that we saw previously, but as you will start seeing, you get, as was the case before, the melee and the ranged version of each Gambit at the same level. Makes sense. So we have here Warcry level 7, Maddening Strike level 14, Safeguard level 14, Brink of Victory level 16, Reddit Blade melee version level 18, same with Shield App at level 18, Fierce Resolve level 20, Deflection level 22, Resounding Challenge level 27, Shield Mastery level 30, same with Shield Tactics level 30, Resolution and Surety of Death level 34, Celebration of Skill and Dance of War level 36, Conviction level 43, Restoration level 45, Desolation level 46, Exaltation of Battle level 50, Precise Blow level 7, Combination Strike level 12, Power Attack level 12, Piercing Strike level 16, Onslaught level 22, Boar's Rush level 25, Mighty Blow level 25, Spear of Virtue level 25, Adroit Maneuver, Wall of Steel level 32, Unerring Strike level 40, Warden's Triumph level 42, The Dark Before Dawn level 44, Cauterizing Steel level 47, Spear of Fate level 48, Unseen Strikes level 49. So to recap, you get, as was the case before, the melee and the ranged versions of each Gambit when you hit the required level, except for all the Gambits that you gain before level 10. You gain the ranged versions of all those Gambits when you hit level 10 and unlock both stances in the Fray and Assailment. That's it as far as skill gain goes from leveling up. Now let us move on to the passives, the Gambit lengths and all other passives. Now the 3 icon Gambits will be unlocked at level 12. As you can see, well, that's when you get a Power Attack, Combination Strike, and that's when you unlock 3 level Gambits. At level 25, you unlock your 4 icon Gambits. As you have seen in here, you unlock Masters at level 24, which is the level before, which is something that Unmac Mahal also stated was his goal, for you to be able to receive Masters just before you unlock the 4 icon Gambit panel. So that's when Masters start becoming quite useful in comparison to regular Gambit builders. At level 38, you get improved depth strike, improved defensive strike, and improved goad, which of course goes in hand with you acquiring battle memory so that you can start taking advantage of the potency effect. At level 40, you unlock your 5 Gambit panel, your 5 length Gambit panel at long last, and you start earning your very first 5 length Gambits alongside another passive skill Heroic that you also unlock on life at level 40. And that's it until level 50. I gotta say I'm a little surprised. I was expecting advanced techniques to be granted as a passive skill. We'll get to advanced techniques later, very soon. But yeah, I was expecting them to be granted as a passive skill. I guess that was not necessary. But well, then a little curious to see how advanced technique exactly works, how it is integrated in the class. But as far as this new level and experience from level 1 to 50, I gotta say I like it quite a lot. Of course, it is far more similar to the original Warden experience before. Once again, the rework with Helm's Deep. This is like the way in which the Warden used to work back then, so it makes me really happy to see it coming back. On one hand, well, the nostalgia of reminiscing about the good old days, but on the other hand, as Unmarked Mahal has stated, something that I also share, is the idea that now that you start unlocking your Gambit panel progressively and you start earning the Gambits at a progressive pace as well, that makes the process of learning what every Gambit does and what Gambit chains do much more easier than what it was before. You might remember, for example, when we were doing the main series, I was a little surprised of Wardens getting Shorty of Death and Conviction at level 16 before you got Brink of Victory and Dance of War, which comes at level 36. That was insane to me, and I think I'm on the same boat as Unmarked Mahal with the idea that added to the confusion that some players might have felt when leveling a Warden, when you start getting different skills. And I mean, if you get Shorty of Death at level 16, what's the point of using any other Gambit from that point onward? Something that I also mentioned when I initially unlocked Shorty of Death at level 16. But now the leveling process is much more simpler and much more straightforward, which will hopefully make the process of learning the basics of the Warden a little bit more easy to master. However, there's something that I gotta say, something that is not exactly stated here on Unmarked Mahal's death diary, because he says this will have no impact on any Warden already over level 50. But that's not exactly the case, because as you see here at level 50, we have already unlocked all Gambits that we have available. But if we look at the leveling process of the Warden and how that leveling process used to work, you will see the current state of the Warden will have you unlock different Gambits past level 50. So you would get Adroit Maneuver at level 58, the Dark Before Dawn at level 60, Exaltation of Battle at level 60, Warden's Triumph at level 70, Resolution at level 72, and Resounding Challenge at level 80. So that means that all Wardens in the level range of 50 to 80 will actually gain new Gambits when the update hits. And that, for me, it's something that is also really encouraging. I think that is also a step in the right direction, because, well, that's something that I also mentioned on the main series. Gambits like, for example, Dark Before Dawn, which is your power restore. There is a class deed that will require you to use that Gambit, but If you only get this Gambit at level 60, that means you can only complete all your class deeds at level 60, which was a downside that Wardens had in comparison to other classes back when you still needed to get trait points from class deeds. And Wardens could only catch up to other classes at level 60 when getting Dark Before Dawn. But now that you get this Gambit in your mid 40s, that makes the process of completing your class deeds more easy now as well. That is just another side activity now that class deeds don't grant trade points, and that also has a lot to do with the fact that this update will also introduce a new power rework, and power is going to be much more valuable now. It's going to be once again a resource that you need to manage. You need to be careful how to use it, how to recover it, so it also makes sense for Dark Before Dawn to be moved to the lower levels. But we also have other useful tools like Resolution and Exaltation of Battle, which prove useful in situations when you are surrounded by a lot of mobs and need some heals. We also have Resounding Challenge, which right now on live is the hardest hitting Gambit the Warden has, and we'll see in just a moment the new damage values for all these Gambits to see if Resounding Challenge is still the best Gambit available for Wardens or not. But the fact that you are getting this at level 27, it's also a step in the right direction. You are gonna have all your skills available to you, all your Gambits at level 50. And that is, I think, I'm not entirely sure, but I also think it has to do with the fact that with the introduction of advanced techniques, that means that for chaining Gambits and keeping track of your advanced techniques, that's gonna change the way in which Warden is played from levels 1 to 25 when you get your 4-length Gambits, and from 25 onward. So now that we are talking about advanced techniques, we can go to the update notes on Bullroarer and start checking all this out, starting with Gambit chains and advanced techniques. Gambit chains will be staying with the class, but they will become a little more flexible. Completing a Gambit chain will require using a 3 Gambit sequence, a 2-length Gambit followed by a 3-length Gambit, and then completed by subsequently using a 4 or 5-length Gambit. After beginning a Gambit chain with a 2-length Gambit, the following Gambits in the chain will gain improved chain damage, healing, and buff durations. These Gambits could be any of the Gambits available to you, and they will no longer need to be part of a specific Gambit sequence. That means you could use Persevere followed by Maddening Strike followed by Spear of Virtue, or you could use Warcry followed by Combination Strike followed by Warden's Triumph. In this last case, both Combination Strike and Warden's Triumph would benefit from the bonuses of being part of a Gambit chain, and Warden's Triumph will also grant you 1 count of Advanced Technique. The only exception to this rule will be Potency Gambits, Depth Strike, Defensive Strike, and Goad, which will not count as beginning a Gambit chain. So now, before we move on to advanced techniques, a little clarification on this. As you can see here, well, right now, once again, on live, Gambit chains only apply to certain Gambit sequences. So for example, if you do Persevere and then Safeguard, then you will have increased benefits from either Restoration or Celebration of Skill. And the same thing happens if you use Warcry and then Brink of Victory. You will have increased effects on Surety of Death or Desolation. But that has been expanded, and now, as you see here, you can use these Gambits much more flexibly. So any 2-length Gambit followed by any 3-length Gambit followed by any 4 or 5-length Gambit. But what's more, something that on McMahon also stated on the forum thread for the Dev Diary is that you can be working on multiple Gambit chains simultaneously. So you can do, for example, a 2-length Gambit, then you do a 3-length Gambit, then you do another 2-length Gambit, you do a 4-length or a 5-length, then you do another 3-length, and then you can start chaining two Gambits at once. 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, 2, 3, 2, 4, 5. That seems like a natural way of flowing things, and that is also what I think resembles a little bit more similarly the way in which Warden rotations work right now, which is something that I've seen some people criticize about this change. The fact that right now on live you start with your stronger Gambits and then use the weaker ones while you wait for your masteries to refresh and unlock once again your stronger Gambits. And some people were under the impression that these Gambit chains are now going against it by forcing you to do 2 length, then follow 3 length, and then follow 4 or 5 length. But as you have seen in here, when you start chaining 2 Gambits at once, 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, that kind of flow, you will see that you will be using a lot of strong Gambits before once again going to the weaker ones. So I think if you really work on a rotation and that might need a little bit of, let's say, math or of checking what masteries you have available and how the cooldowns interact with each other, I think you can still be able to do your stronger Gambits followed by the weak ones. The only instance in which you would really need to start with the weaker ones is at the beginning of the fight while you get into the flow of the new Gambit chains. But from what I understand now, as soon as you enter into this flow, the rotation might more closely resemble what Wardens have now, but with the added flexibility of combining every Gambit that you like and not just specific sequences. So with that out of the way, now let's see what this advanced technique is that you will start gaining when completing your Gambit chains. And that takes us to advanced technique. Several new Warden skills will be normal skills bound by cooldowns rather than Gambit skills requiring builders. These skills will have short strong effects and moderate cooldown times. However, rather than being freely available at full strength, their potency will be driven by advanced technique. Each skill will require at least one advanced technique, consume all of your advanced technique when used, and will become stronger with each additional advanced technique consumed when the skill fires. And how will you earn advanced technique? You'll receive 1 count every time you complete a Gambit chain, up to 3 maximum, until they are either consumed by a skill or you leave combat. Now, from what I understand about advanced techniques, and I think this is something that On McMahal mentioned on Gin's server, which I recommend you to go to if you want to stay up to date with the discussions on all these class changes, is that the advanced technique skills have been reworked so that the minimum requirement for you to be able to use them has been lowered, making for you easier to be able to use those skills, but still with the possibility of increasing their effects the more advanced techniques you have. So once again, once you get into the flow of Gambit chains that we were discussing before, you will see, or well, that's my understanding of it. Once again, I'm just checking the notes before doing a proper testing on Bullroarer, but once you get into the flow of building your Gambit chains, you can start ramping up advanced techniques fairly consistently. So from the looks of it, you will be hard pressed to find a scenario in which you won't have at least 1 count of advanced technique. But at least we have the option of using some of these skills even if we don't have any advanced techniques available. Now we'll be taking a closer look at advanced techniques and the skills that do use it in just a moment, because first we have the changes, overall changes coming to Gambits. And first of all, what really stands out is this. In general, we've done away with the notion of Gambits having different effects in Assailment. Assailment will make all the usual Gambits work at range like you're used to, but there's no reason for a melee Gambit to have a dot while its ranged version doesn't. And for me, this is something that is also really exciting, because one of the reasons why I never bothered with Assailment is simply because I couldn't learn the differences, the different effects between the melee Gambits and the ranged Gambits, and that added an unnecessary layer of complexity in my opinion. So now that they are consolidating the effects, that should make learning the Gambits a little more simple, a little easier. And now it seems the real choice in here is whether you want to be melee or range, which I think will add a lot of versatility to the Warden. There are some instances that are very melee heavy and other instances that are very ranged heavy, and now Wardens can fit either of those two specters, and you can also adapt to the needs of the group in a way which I hope it's going to work better than what we have now. So here we have one example of what I was just telling you about, especially in cases like an Erring Strike, which currently applies nearly identical but stacking because they are technically different dots in its two versions. This is needlessly confusing for players, just what I was saying, and an Erring Strike is one of the easy ones to remember because it's very similar to the melee, as Onmak Mahal is saying. In the future, if a Gambit has an effect while in the fray, it should have the same effect while Assailment is active. Additionally, to maintain parity, no Gambits will be locked behind a specific specialization, and no Gambits will have longer than normal cooldowns. That means Shield Master and Shield Tactics will always be available, and Shield Tactics will no longer have a 10-second cooldown. So before we take a look into each one of the Gambit sequences, I think it's also better to see some of the general skills of the Warden and some of the changes as well that are coming, because as you might have seen, this applet is also dropping with a Power and Mastery revamp that once again is beyond the scope of this video, but it still has its effects in here. For example, here we have a picture comparing the Gambit builders, the Gambit default, and the potency Gambits between life, which is the upper portion of the picture. The Gambit builders from beta are on the second line, so to speak, and we have now the potency Gambits on the left we have life, on the right we have beta, and then we have, well, range depth strike here in this corner because I didn't have any more space for it. But well, the first thing that you will see that stands out is that all Gambit builders have lost their secondary effects. That is something that will come in that Onmak Mahal will mention later, but you can see it in play right here now. All that we have in here is your Gambit builders now just do some damage, whether it be melee or ranged. Same with Gambit default, it will do just some damage. And same with the potency Gambits, once again just some damage. Goat has lost its damage over time, defensive strike has lost its defensive boosts. You would also see here something that it's true all across the board. Cooldowns have been reduced in general, so builders now have half a second of cooldown, and Gambits have 0.8 seconds of cooldown. Gambit default is the shortest cooldown of them all with 0.1 seconds. And once again, you will see that reduction in cooldowns in all the Gambits and skills that we're about to see. Well, all Gambits, not so sure about skills, we'll see in just a moment. And we also see here the difference in power costs, because power will now scale to your level. However, something that Onmak Mahal mentioned on the forum thread after Bullroarer began is that for round 2, and maybe this will make it to live, Gambit builders will no longer cost power, and Gambit masteries will have the power cost that builders had in this first round of beta, so around 500 power at level 140. So that is it for Gambit builders and potency Gambits. Now let's take a look at some general skills. You will see First Aid and Steadfast. Well, other than the updated power cost and updated icons, they have not changed much. Almost the same with Shield Slam. Well, some adjustments in damage there. Now, here in the fray, well, we only have the attack duration bonus because, well, we'll get to see how that melee damage is compensated by traits later on in this video. Assailment is well, just range combat. Once again, some of the effects granted when stance swapping have been removed. Momentum and I forgot the name of the other one, but you got one boost from going to melee, from melee to range, and from range to melee. All those have been removed. Quick recovery now has a 0.1 second cooldown, and recovery has 2 second cooldown, so these two once again have been decreased. Battle preparation remains the same, but now Gambit builders will not have any animations when you are using battle preparation, so that will speed up your process of building Gambits a lot. Masteries and Gambits still have animations in battle preparation, but builders don't. And Never Surrender, which remains unchanged in this round of beta. And lastly, we have here the Javelin skills that have been consolidated. So in this case, you will see on the upper portion of the picture the new Gambit skills, the consolidated Gambit skill, Javelin skills, sorry. And on the second and third line is what we currently have on live. Critical Strike will go. Mark Target and Diminish Targets will no longer be Javelin skills, they will be moved to traits. Shield Piercer and Wages of Fear will go. Ambush, it still has the Knockout and the Run Speed boost. It's now can be used in combat. And you can remove the Induction with a trait that we'll get to see in just a moment. Warning Shot, still the same as now. But now the outgoing damage debuff lasts a little bit longer. Warning Shot, once again, you can only get in the Determination blue line specialization. Hampering Javelin, Semi-Effects, and Javelin of the Deadly Force, which you can give the effects of Mark Target and Diminish Target, once again with some traits that we'll get to see in just a moment. But with this out of the way, we are ready now to start comparing Gambit sequences, starting with Spear Gambits, and the first Gambit sequence that we have is the Offensive Strike through Unseen Strike Gambit sequence. Gambits in this sequence have improved its initial skill damage and deal damage to multiple targets in front of you, so the idea is that all the Gambits in this sequence will deal burst damage in AoE. Offensive Strike no longer has a mortal tap, it is now a frontal AoE dealing moderate direct damage. Combination Strike is now a frontal AoE dealing moderate direct damage. Force Rush is now a frontal AoE dealing moderate direct damage. And Unseen Strikes is now a targeted attack, striking your current target and 2 nearby enemies, while consuming all damaging effects from Warcry, Brink of Victory, Shorty of Death, or Desolation on each target to deal bonus damage. This will effectively cash out most of your AoE light damage dots. So this is something that we'll also get to see. The cash out effects have been expanded. Now we just don't have Quick Sweep for cashing out bleeds and other effects. And this is the first example of this. All the dots from the Warcry sequence can now be cashed out by Unseen Strikes only. So no other Gambit on this sequence will do the cash out. And on this picture, you can also see a comparison from the live version that it's located on the left side, both melee and ranged, and beta, which is on the right side, both melee and ranged as well, with the inclusion of Unseen Strikes. So you'll see that the damage as you go from one Gambit to the other, well, they increase in damage as they also increase in length. That makes sense. And you will see that they also apply a critical defense debuff, because that is something that comes from a trait and we'll get to see traits in just a moment. The next Gambit sequence that we have is from the boot to Cauterize and Steal. Gambits in this sequence have greatly improved initial skill damage and will only deal damage to your current target. So once again, this is intended to be burst damage, but single target only. And I also really like this idea that we will get a Gambit sequences for burst damage and for dots, for AoE and for single target, because I remember raids, for example, like the Abyss of Mordath, that were very punishing with AoEs, and well, as of right now, most of the Warden's damage comes from AoEs, so I always felt hindered in those kind of situations, and it's good to see that now we have a measure against that. So we have these new changes. Onslaught deals strong damage to a single target, it will no longer interrupt your target. Wall of Steel deals strong damage to a single target, it will no longer interrupt your target, it will no longer give you a parry buff. Cauterize and Steal deals strong damage to a single target and consumes any physical bleeds from the power attack and Iron Strike Gambit sequence to deal bonus damage. So the only Gambit that retains the interruption in this sequence is the boot, but well, we also have Shield Slam, which is the skill that was introduced a few updates ago. And the parry buff from Wall of Steel has been removed, and that has been moved somewhere else. We'll get to see a little bit that of where the buff went in just a moment when we get to traits. And the cash out effect that used to be from Quick Sweep has been added now to Cauterize and Steal. So once again, if you want to cash out, you can only use Cauterize and Steal. And once again, here we have the comparison. Life is on the left and beta is on the right. You see in here that something else that this sequence has gained is a decreased physical mitigation from marked target that comes from a trait. If you don't trade it, it's not gonna give you those debuffs, but once again, we'll get to traits in just a moment. And remember, the only one that interrupts now inductions on the enemies is the boot. The next sequence that we have from Spear Gambits is Power Attack through Unerring Strike. Gambits in this sequence apply physical wound type bleeds which match the damage type of your main hand weapon. These bleeds are strong and have a longer base duration than your other damage over time effects. These Gambits will no longer act as a discrete Gambit chain, that is, Power Attack will no longer make your target temporarily weak to Mighty Blow, and Mighty Blow will no longer make your target temporarily weak to Unerring Strike. And that is something that I really never used, but if you wanted an example of having been almost obliged to do the weaker Gambits first and go up the chain, that was it, and this has been removed. But overall, I would say this Gambit sequence is the one that has changed, one of the ones that has changed the least from live to beta. So in this case, the live versions of these Gambits are on the upside and the beta versions are on the downside. You will see here that, as stated on the notes, these Gambits now have a way longer duration than they used to at 40 seconds for a total of 10 ticks. The damage has also increased in this Gambit line, especially for Assailment, but some of the melee versions have their damage increased as well. And well, you can also see in here the Dark Before Dawn. This is not mentioned in the Bullroarer thread, so I figured might as well include it in here. The effects is it still adds power, but it's no longer percentage based power, instead is a fixed amount. And well, since now we have bigger power poles, I'm not entirely sure if 4 ticks of 5,000 power it's gonna do it. That sounds around 20 to 30% of your total power bar, so you gotta keep an eye on your power now more than ever. But this is something curious, because I found on my testing that, well, Determination Blue Line Wardens have less power issues than Red Line Wardens, which is the opposite on live. Right now, Red Line Wardens don't have any power issues at all, but if you try to go blue, you will start running out of power sooner rather than later. And I find it ironic a little bit that this has been switched on this beta, but that once again is one of the effects of this new power revamp that we'll also get on update 35. And lastly, we have the Adroit Maneuver and Warden's Triumph sequence. The buff from Adroit Maneuver will also give you a small amount of finesse rating. Alright, that sounds nice. And the buff from Warden's Triumph will increase both melee and ranged damage, and will also add +1 pulse to all your damage over time effects. And that sounds like something that it might come really in handy for your rotations. Now you don't only get extra damage, but you can also make your Gambit slots longer. So I think, in theory, that should increase your DPS. Although on the testings that I have done so far, it seems I've been doing better if I stop worrying about Adroit Maneuver and Warden's Triumph. However, we'll need to, I will need to do some more testing. I'm not the greatest one at rotations, but I will show you what I did at the end of the video. Reversal remains unchanged. It removes 1 corruption from the target, and that's it. But now Adroit Maneuver gives you extra finesse, and Warden's Triumph gives you extra range damage and 1 Gambit damage over time pulses. That's it for Spear Gambits. Now let us move to Shield Gambits, and starting with the Gambit sequence, Persevere through Restoration. Now, Persevere will give you a minor buff, but otherwise the sequence is entirely focused on personal healing. Persevere's buff no longer gives block and partial block rating, and now gives 2.5% incoming healing instead. It retains its heal over time. Safeguard has lost its block and partial block buff. It will retain its heal over time. Celebration of Skill has lost its block, partial block, and incoming healing buff. It will gain an instant morale heal, stronger initial healing than your other heal over time based Gambits, but with less overall healing value. And it seems Restoration, remains unchanged. I really like the change to Celebration of Skill a lot. I gotta say, I really found it odd that Celebration of Skill didn't give you any sort of heals. I understand they were trying to give the Gambit a buff side to complement the self heals from the other Gambits, but I like this idea better. A Celebration of Skill as some sort of burst healing as opposed to your heal over times, and I think that those two complement each other really well. We'll see. We have the incoming healing buff that has been moved to Persevere, and all these avoidances have been added to other Gambits, so overall I don't think we have lost much. Here you can see once again the picture. Live it's up top, beta is down below. Something that I also really like about this beta is how the icons have been consolidated as well. So now all shield Gambits and shield builders have green icons, and likewise with Fist Builder and Fist Gambits that will have yellow, and Spear is now red. This is another consolidation effect that I think works really well. But going now, comparing the heals, you will see these heals have very big values on beta. That's something that Unmac Mahal reported. The heals were doing more than intended, especially Persevere, which is healing for about 10 times more than it should have. So that was OP on this round of beta. I tried my best not to use Persevere to get closer to reality results. But well, in the end, my muscle memory got the best of me a couple times. I ended up using Persevere, but note that these healing values are going to be adjusted. Now we have a couple of new / returning gambits in here. First of all, we have Shield Up. Shield Up will give you a buff with block rating and -2% incoming ranged and tactical damage. And then Shield Mastery will give you a block rating buff. Once again, Shield Up, it's a gambit that used to exist back in the Isengard days, I remember it. Never used it that much because Shield Mastery was just better. But now that Shield Up has this incoming range and tactical damage reduction, I think it's gonna be really handy as well. And likewise, we also have Reddit Blade and Shield Tactics. And in this case, Reddit Blade is the one that it's gonna give you the parry rating that we lost from a Wall of Steel, plus -2 incoming melee damage. And Shield Tactics will give you a buff with critical defense rating and tactical mitigation. It will also give you a temporary stun immunity, much like Life. The Gambit itself will have a 1-second cooldown like other Gambits, because the stun immunity already has a cooldown, so there's no reason for the Gambit to have a cooldown on top of the cooldown. However, something that was reported on this round of beta is that if you had Shield Tactics up and the stun immunity up, and you used Shield Tactics again, it would refresh the stun immunity instead of the stun immunity going to cooldown. So that has been reported, and that most likely will get fixed before the release of update 35. In any case, once again, you have the image here showing you the live versions of these gambits up top and the beta versions down below. As mentioned before, Shield Mastery and Shield Tactics no longer require you to be on blue line, they are always available. But of course, these gambits complement better the playstyle of a blue line Warden. But if you are a red line Warden running some instances and you want some extra protection, or you are trying to solo some stuff up, well, you have the option once again, and that is really nice. I really like Shield Up, well, for the tactical and range damage reduction, but Reddit Blade also provides very good buffs, and since those two are 3-length gambits, I think they would fit easily into the rotation, and their effects are pretty much worth it. And finally, we have the Impressive Flourish to Conviction Gambit sequence. Impressive Flourish has lost its dot effect. That's something that On McMahal also mentioned, how it felt weird for him to have a dot effect on a shield gambit, so that has been removed. The buff from Impressive Flourish no longer gives its old stats, instead it now gives a parry rating buff. So here we have another parry rating that was moved, well, from Wall of Steel. You see it's appearing in many different places. Maddening Strike will give you an evade rating buff. Dance of War will give you a buff with physical mitigation and evade. Conviction will give you a buff with tactical mitigation and evade. And Conviction will still apply a heal over time to you and your fellowship. And well, once again, it hasn't changed as much from from what we have on live. You can see here in the picture, once again, the heal values are a little bit higher than what they should, but the ratings are almost the same. Some critical defense has been moved to other places, but overall, well, each gambit now has a distinctive identity. If you want parry, if you want evade, if you want physical mitigation, if you want tactical mitigation, you would go with each one of these. Now, moving on to the fifth gambits, the gambit sequence a precise blow through Spear of Fate. Spear of Fate is a new gambit. Gambits in this sequence will apply light damage dots to your current target. These dot effects will pulse at a slightly faster rate than your other dots and will not be cleansable, so monster players will not be able to remove them by using potions or skills. The new gambit that we have in here is Spear of Fate. Will apply a short put-in damage over time effect, dealing light damage to your target. This dot has a weaker pulse and shorter overall duration than the dot applied by Spear of Virtue, but will pulse at a higher frequency, doing greater damage in a shorter period. That's what this Gambit is supposed to do in theory, but as of right now, it's still not quite there yet. It's still better using Spear of Virtue over Spear of Fate, even though, well, Spear of Fate has 12 ticks, it's still not able to equal what Spear of Virtue does in 8 ticks. Something that you will also see in here is that these Gambits will apply the Tactical Mitigation debuff from diminished targets that once again you need to trade for, and we'll take a look at that when we check traits. But this is the Gambit sequence, the revamped Gambit sequence with the introduction of Spear of Fate and Javelin of Fate. As you can see here, it has lost its critical defense debuff. That debuff has moved somewhere else once again. Other than that, well, you can see here what it does. Next up, we have the Gambit sequence Warcry through Desolation. Gambits in this sequence will apply light damage dots to a group of enemies. These effects will be weaker than your single target effects. These dot effects will be cry resistance type, so monster players will be able to remove them. Warcry no longer gives you an evade rating buff, Brink of Victory no longer gives evade, Shorty of Death no longer gives evade, Desolation no longer applies a mischance or fear effect to its targets. So light damage remains unchanged from what we have on live. As it has been said here, weaker than single target Gambits, which once again makes sense. Right now on live, there was truly no reason to use anything other than Shorty of Death. It was better in single target and AoE situations. This has been fixed right now. Something that also happened on this round of beta is Brink of Victory had its number of targets decreased, its radius decreased, and it's now a frontal AoE instead of an 360 degrees AoE. That is a change that I don't like quite as much. If you've seen my videos, you would know that I would do a lot of my pulls with Shorty of Death and Brink of Victory to pick up many enemies that I missed along the way that were out of range, maybe lag, something like that. I use Brink of Victory through that. Without Brink of Victory doing that, I guess we could use Resounding Challenge, but I will need to practice that, I guess. Once again, muscle memory. We'll need to relearn how I do my pulls. And now we have, once again, a new / returning Gambit Deflection. Will reduce how threatening you are to a group of enemies immediately. And then next up the sequence we have Resounding Challenge that has adopted the effect it currently has in Assailment, dealing AoE damage and applying a dot to any enemy is hit. When specialized in the Determination 3, it will also increase your threat over time. So now that we are talking about Deflection and Resounding Challenge, a couple things in here worth mentioning. First of all, Resounding Challenge now should have the initial damage and then the damage over time effect. However, as of right now on beta, only the melee version does. The ranged version still doesn't have the initial damage, but that has been reported that is going to be fixed. And we have Deflection in here, which is a threat, a decreasing Gambit that once again we had during the Isengard days. It was very useful in fights in which we needed to do aggro swapping, and maybe will be again. But now that we are talking about that, we can also mention something that on Magma Hall also, well, said on Gin's Discord. Two different things about threat: Resounding Challenge, Resolution, Exaltation of Battle, Fierce Resolve, Flourish, Maddening Strike, Warcry, Brink of Victory, Shorty of Death, Desolation, and Goat all get additional threat in Determination. That is not expressed on any tooltip, but we have a confirmation for that. And secondly, he would also like to add a deflection variant that steals threat from your fellowship instead. And that sounds a whole lot like aggression, another gambit that we had during the Isengard days that was removed. It was OP, but it was so much fun. And I don't know, if we get this kind of threat steals back, that will be another step in making Warden tanking be what it was before Helm's Deep, and that sounds really exciting as well. And lastly, it's not mentioned on the notes, but another Gambit sequence that we gotta look at is Fierce Resolve to Exaltation of Battle. Once again, we have life up top, beta down below. The morale tabs, well, they haven't changed much. They have their values adjusted. Resolution is still just a single heal, but very powerful. Exaltation of Battle and Fierce Resolve still have 4 ticks. So it's not mentioned because it really didn't change that much, but I still think it's worth including it in the video so you have a full picture of all your gambits. Next up, we have the skills, and this is gonna focus especially on the new advanced technique skills, starting with Blue Line, which has 3 new skills. The first one is Restorative Shield Work. This skill will require at least 1 advanced technique and will convert all of your tiers of advanced technique into tiers of Restorative Shield Work for 10 seconds. While you have at least 1 tier remaining, you will gain plus 50 partial block chance, and each time you're hit, 1 tier will be removed, healing you for 10% of your morale. So this seems to be an emergency skill that would provide you some sort, well, functions similar to a morale bubble in the sense that it's not exactly the same, but it seems similar to me, and you can recover up to 50% of your morale during those 10 seconds. However, the consensus on beta was that it was still too short, and from the looks of it, it seems it's gonna have its duration increased. However, I will let you know about that when we have a new round of beta, but that is a Restorative Shield Work. Next one up, we have Desperate Combat, which is one of the more unique skills that we have for advanced techniques. This skill will consume all of your advanced technique, transforming this skill for 30 seconds and giving you a number of skill uses equal to the number of advanced technique consumed. Desperate Combat would have 3 possible versions: Spear, Shield, or Fist, depending on your last Gambit type used. You could use more than 1 type of Desperate Combat skill by using different Gambit types in between uses of Desperate Combat. I don't know if that sounds confusing to you or not, but basically you can use the skill once or per each count of advanced technique that you have, and if you use different gambits in between the uses of the skill will transform itself into one of these 3 variations. Desperate Spear, strong AoE frontal damage, which applies a short debuff increasing the target's incoming damage. Desperate Shield, weak AoE frontal damage, which heals you for each target hit. And Desperate Fist, moderate AoE damage, which applies a force taunt, not a threat copy, to each target hit. So you can see here in the picture we have the new advanced technique skills. Once again, we have life up top, we have the red line skills on the second line, and we have the blue line skills last. So we can see first Restorative Shield Work that has been duly explained, and here we have Desperate Combat. This one with the blue icon is the one that you will activate to use your advanced techniques and enable the other skill that will transform into one of these 3 versions. Desperate Spear, that will give plus 3% incoming damage, all types of damage, a strong hitting ability. Desperate Shield, max targets 6. So that means it can help you to up to about 500,000 morale. So it doesn't seem so bad. Once again, a very effective, almost immediate heal, provided you have all the enemies surrounding you to take advantage of it. And lastly, a Desperate Fist, which moderate damage, as has been said, plus the Forced Attack. And then we have, for the free peoples, will no longer require you to use Gambit builders to tier up its effect. Instead, it will immediately consume all of your advanced technique, instantly giving you and your fellowship a buff reducing incoming damage. Your personal damage reduction will be stronger than the group-wide effect, and the potency of both will scale depending on the number of advanced technique consumed. So now on live, yeah, the buff for the free peoples depends on how many Gambit builders you get to use during the duration of the buff. Now it's depending on advanced techniques, and here we have the value for 1 tick of advanced techniques, minus 15% damage, but you can make that up to, I believe it was minus 25, minus 30%. So it does increase quite significantly. That's it for the blue line exclusive skills. Red line also got a couple of skills. Well, first of all, Shield Piercer has been removed. Recklessness. This skill, in addition to its existing effects, would consume all your advanced technique and give you a buff, including greatly increased initial damage proportional to the number of advanced technique consumed. So now Recklessness would use advanced technique, and once again the damage bonus would increase with it. So the idea is for you to be able to... It's not gonna be the plus 50% that we have on life now, it's gonna be close to plus 30, but it still provide a sizable benefit to it. Although the penalty to block, parry and evade has been increased as well. That would be truly the only advanced technique exclusive to red line, because these other ones that you see here on screen come from the yellow line. So first of all, Javelin of the Deadly Force, this needs to be traded for, and the skill remains unchanged, except that, as I told you, it would also apply the marked and diminished debuffs to the enemies it hits. This would give you an infrequent way to apply both debuffs immediately to clusters of mobs. You need to have those two traits unlocked to add the effect to Javelin of the Deadly Force, but that really is not hard to do. Snapshot. Now, rather than give copies of every Javelin skill, this effect will reset your Javelin skill cooldowns. The list of affected skills will also be a bit slimmer due to having fewer Javelin skills overall. Ambush, Hampering Javelin, Javelin of Deadly Force, and Warning Shot if specialized in Determination. So, very different from what we have now on live, but once again we'll be comparing traits in just a moment. Here we have the Way of Spear is a self-buff skill with a 120-second cooldown, 2 minutes. The skill will be one of 3 variants depending on the type of your last gambit used, Spear, Shield or Fist. All 3 variants will consume all of your advanced technique, granting you a buff for 15 seconds, the potency of which depends on the number of advanced technique consumed. When consuming the maximum of 3, the buffs granted will be the Way of Spear plus 50% initial damage, the Way of Shield plus 30% Gambit healing, and the Way of the Fist plus 15% damage over time. And here on the picture you can see the effects for 1 tick of advanced technique as opposed to 3. But since this is a yellow skill, that means that you can use it either on red line or blue line. And the other skill that does so is Rapid Techniques, a self-buff skill which gives your masteries 0 cooldown for 6 seconds, says on the forum thread, but on Bullroarer it was 4 seconds, after which it will reset your mastery cooldowns every 2 seconds. So think of this as a short first with no cooldown, then a periodic reset on a 90-second cooldown. This is intended to be the replacement for Seize the Moment because, well, Unmak Mahal said for him Seize the Moment seemed a little bit unreliable. Some people might disagree, but what I will have to say about Seize the Moment, as fun as it was applying all those gambits on quick succession, I think it was counterintuitive to the Warden style of play. Seize the Moment is a reactive skill, so you would adapt your gameplay every time you got the proc. But Wardens are supposed to be proactive, a proactive class, meaning you gotta plan ahead what will you need and have it ready for when you need it. And Seize the Moment, in my opinion, broke that flow. So rapid techniques will give us a similar functionality, but something that we can control on our own, and that way take it into a more proactive play style. So those would be the skills that are now dependent on advanced techniques. Rapid techniques was initially intended to use your advanced techniques, but it no longer does. So now you just need to use it and activate the cooldown. A total duration of 10 seconds, 4 seconds without mastery cooldowns, and then 3 resets in the 6 remaining seconds. And lastly, well, we had the javelin skills that we talked about earlier. Ambush, which no longer requires you to be out of combat to use. It will retain its induction unless you have the Adroit Ambush trait and have used Adroit Maneuver in combat before using Ambush. So it's an extra step, but that way we can have the run speed boost in combat. And lastly, Mark Target, Diminish Target, Shield Piercer, Critical Strike, Wages of Fear, and Dodge This will all be removed. With so many Gambits having Assailment versions, there's simply no need to have so many instant javelin skills, which generally do insignificant damage and whose significant secondary effects will now be delivered through Gambits. And I also like that change a lot because that has allowed Wardens to clear up some space on the quick slots and maybe add some useful items. Well, we need some of these slots for our advanced techniques, but overall it looks a little bit cleaner. And finally, we come at long last to a look at the way in which the traits have been reworked. Starting with the traits in the blue line, Gambit builders will no longer give stacking partial BPE buffs. Gambits will no longer have a 10% chance for applying minor buffs. Specializing in the determination tree will grant the restorative shield work skill in addition to warning shot. So that's something that we saw earlier, Gambit builders losing its effects, and now you get 2 different skills by going into the blue line. In here we have the changes done to the different ranks that you get by advancing in the blue line. Not all of these ranks have been changed, but most of them have. Thrill of Battle will increase both morale tap damage and morale tap healing. Shield Mastery will add 5% physical mitigation to Shield Mastery and 5% tactical mitigation to Shield Tactics. Elegant Finish, rather than adding specific bonuses to individual Gambits like it did before with Shorty of Death, Desolation, Celebration of Skill, and Restoration, this trait now will add 10 seconds to buff durations and 10% healing to skills used in a Gambit chain. Shield Tactics will give each of your Shield Gambit buffs improved or additional bonuses. Incoming healing from Persevere, partial parry from Impressive Flourish, partial evade and threat generation from Maddening Strike, damage reduction from Shield Up and Reddit Blade, and mitigations from Dance of War and Conviction. And Revel in Combat has been replaced by a new skill, Desperate Combat. We already saw what the skill does, but now in here you can see the comparison between life up top and beta down below, how most of these ranks, bonus ranks, change as you move into the blue line. Although some of them have been somehow conserved. For example, Close Call, dodging an attack will restore 1% of your maximum morale. This has been changed to only being activated on, well, evade or partial evade, but now you can only gain this effect no more than once every 3 seconds, so a limit has been added to that. But other than that, it also remains, well, basically the same as Exaltation of Battle, which gives you 2 more ticks to your morale tabs. All other rank bonuses have been changed, as you can see in here. And now, as for the trait themselves, Warcry now gives 2 up to 10% Fist Gambit damage. Careful Shield Work gives 1 to 5% range damage reduction to the buff from Shield Up. Careful Blade Work will do the same for Reddit Blades. Defiance trait has been removed. The 5% mitigations formerly gained by using Defiant Challenge with this trait are effectively moving to Shield Mastery and Shield Tactics while you are specialized in the Determination tree, which is really nice. Something that many people I heard complain about, how we had our forced attack and our mitigation skills both tied together, and that was very restrictive. That is no longer the case. The Impressive Flourish trait has been removed. Unassailable, the trait effect has been replaced by 3 ranks, giving you 2 up to 10 seconds of extra duration for your buffs. Counter attack has been removed. Indefatigable, this trait has been replaced by 5 ranks, giving more Shield Gambit healing. Thick Skin has been replaced by 4 ranks, which increase the potency of your 2 length Gambits. And Fear No Darkness improves for both morale tap damage and morale tap healing. And once again, here you have the comparison in between both. Life is on the left and beta is on the right. I apologize if it's not that easy to read, but it's the only way in which I could include all traits in a single picture, also showing you how they are organized on the trait tree. So the first rank now has Warcry, the Fist Gambit damage, and Persevere, the Shield Gambit line healing. And by spending 5 ranks on 5 points in here, we unlock the second rank with these 3 traits. Then moving on to the second ones in here, critical defense and damage reduction from Reddit Blade, and so on and so forth. But the main changes are covered in the Bullroarer thread. You will see that some of these traits have been removed or have been moved somewhere else. Now, moving on to the red line, Gambit builders will no longer give a stacking melee damage buff. Gambits will no longer have a 10% chance for applying minor buffs. We also saw that. The specialization effect that reduces your outgoing healing by 50% has instead become an effect that reduces your Gambit skill healing specifically, rather than your base outgoing healing stat. Now, Recklessness no longer grants you the Shield Piercer Javelin skill because, well, that skill has been removed. And here we have the changes to the rank bonuses. Unconventional Strikes would now improve the initial damage bonus from Gambit Chains. Taking Advantage gives you now a chance to deal a little bit of damage to enemies who block, parry, or evade one of your attacks. And Martial Fury now gives you 1 additional pulse to your Gambit damage over time effects, plus 10 damage over time, and plus 10% initial skill damage. So you can see here the comparison. You will also see that as opposed to Blue Line, most of these ranks remain unchanged. Sharpened Spears, Precision Training, one after another, Grand Master Weapons Training. So overall, I would say Red Line is the one that has changed the least from live to beta. Moving on to the Red Line traits, we have now on the offense. This trait gives 2 to 10% morale tap damage and healing. Offensive Strike no longer has a morale tap. We saw that comparing the Gambits before. Spear Sweep, Quick Sweep, and No Mercy have been consolidated into a single trait, improving the damage from your physical spear bleeds. because the cash out effect has now been moved to other gambits and expanded, as we have also seen. No Respite for the Wicked, the effect from this trait would be changed to the Wall of Steel Gambit line, with the Offensive Strike Gambit line now AoE. Applying such a strong debuff with AoE skills would make it too easy to apply this effect. Warden's Triumph will also have now increased duration up to 30 seconds, on top of all the other effects it already had. And now instead of shield spikes, we have Muscle Memory, a trait that causes any skill used from battle memory to restore a small amount of power. I seem to remember battle memory used to work like that initially, and yeah, that's part of the idea. You would use some of your morale instead of power to use your gambits, and that way gaining power. So I don't know if this alone would be enough to bring morale surfing back. Doesn't seem likely, but it does take us back to those old days of trading morale for power and vice versa. So that seems interesting. Would really like to see how that works. However, you will see that the tooltip for No Respite for the Wicked hasn't been fully updated. However, the idea is there. Gambits in the Put to Cauterize and Steel line will apply an incoming healing debuff to enemies instead of, well, single target instead of AoE. But that is truly it as Redline goes. Once again, you can see here the comparison of the traits, also separated from ranks, so that you can see, start planning how you will need to spend some of your points to get where you want to be. Because, and that is the biggie, and now that we move to yellow, as yellow will no longer allow specialization, it will no longer have specialization bonuses. Some of those bonuses are being moved into the trait tree, and that means that we have so many traits now in yellow that it's really hard to get all the good stuff in here, plus what you would like to pick from the red tree especially. It's easier, in my opinion, to mix and match blue with yellow rather than red with yellow. But let's take a look at what yellow does. So we have a new trait, Endurance Training, that gives you attack duration reduction in Assailment. That's something that used to be a specialization bonus, but it's now a trait. We have a new trait, Movement Training, which will increase the duration of, and the potency of your shield gambit buffs up to 10% extra. Lasting Mark, the trait has been split into two traits, Mark Targets and Diminished Targets, to apply the corresponding effects to certain gambit lines. So Mark Target will apply the skills to the Boot to Cauterize and Steel sequence, and Diminished Target would do the same to the skills to the gambits from Precise Blow to Spear of Fate. And subsequent ranks on both traits will increase the duration of the debuffs. We also have the trait for range damage going up to 15%, not as much as we used to have on life, but still there. Throwing Arm, that will allow us to increase the range of our javelin skills, and likewise our javelin gambits. That coupled with the tracery means that, well, you can have a long range if you fancy going into assailment stance. Momentum and shield sap have been removed. The stances should stand on their own, and these bonuses mostly encourage quickly toggling between stances without meaningfully changing your gameplay. So I was really not a big fan of stance dancing either. The only reason why I did that was to get Resounding Challenge and an Erring Strike in Assailment before going back to melee. So those bonuses have been removed. Strong Foundations. This trait causes your Gambit Builder skills to reduce the active cooldowns of their related mastery skills up to -2 seconds. For example, using Quick Thrust will reduce the active cooldowns of your Spear and Shield and Spear and Fist mastery skills. And likewise with Warden's Taunt, and likewise with a Shield Bash that will reduce the cooldowns of the respective masteries. So now that our masteries have a 10-second cooldown coupled with this effect, really the need for Seize the Moment has decreased so much that you will see when you get to play it that there are many different ways to get your masteries off cooldown. So in my opinion, Seize the Moment is really not that needed anymore. Moving on, we have Warp Javelins, Shattered Javelins, Area Targeting, and Hurry Up With That. These traits have been removed. This is part of the greater effect consolidation between melee and ranged Gambits. With marked and diminished debuffs being applied by Gambits, Area Targeting doesn't have a place in the Warden's kit, because once again, Area Targeting has been moved as a new buff for Javelin of the Deadly Force. Hurry Up With That frankly gives too strong a buff and it affects very few rolls. Notably, it didn't improve anything for the Warden who actually used a droid maneuver. So I have heard of that. I never got into a group where I could really take advantage of that, but I can see why that would be removed, as Wardens really don't benefit at all from an induction reduction. A droid ambush, however, is a new trait, and with this one, a droid maneuver will remove the induction from your next use of ambush. Combined with ambush being usable in combat, this allows Wardens to prime ambush by using a droid maneuver, giving access to ambush and the run speed bonus without being forced to do a lengthy induction, something that a lot of people were asking for a long time. I'm not so sure still about the duration. It's only 5 seconds, and I think the run speed boosts from other tanks are still longer, so I hope we can have a longer duration for ambush, but we'll see how it goes. Fire Wheel will no longer give mastery rating. Instead, it gives plus 5% range damage and plus 5% tactical damage plus 10% attack duration reduction. And I think this is done in order to accommodate to the new mastery changes that are also introduced on update 35. Battering Strikes, the first rank of this trait, adds a critical defense debuffs to Gambits in the offensive strike sequence, and more ranks increase the potency of this debuff. We saw that when we were checking the Gambits before. Suppression will add an outgoing damage debuff to Gambits in the Warcry Desolation line, rather than the offensive strike line. That one we have also seen. Javelin of the Deadly Force now deals considerably more damage and will apply marked and diminished target debuffs if those traits have been earned to any enemy's hit. Snapshot now requires Javelin of the Deadly Force as a prerequisite, and instead of giving you copies of every Javelin skill, this effect will reset your Javelin skills cooldowns. The list of affected skills will also be a bit slimmer once again because of the consolidation of Javelin skills. Seize the Moment. This trait has been removed. While Seize the Moment is a strong effect, it is not always a reliable proc, and when it does proc, the fact that it removes all mastery skill cooldowns for 10 seconds completely upends the flow of mastery and Gambit usage. Some of you love Seize the Moment, but the whole class is designed around builders and masters getting your rate of Gambit skill use. Removing that gate almost entirely by virtue of an unreliable proc has had some negative consequences for gameplay. We are counteracting the loss of this trait with Strong Foundations, the mechanic that causes Gambit builders to reduce some active mastery cooldowns, and with Rapid Techniques, which gives you periodic mastery resets for a brief time. So we already discussed that, and I also gave you another reason why I think Seize the Moment really didn't fit that much the Warden gameplay. Way of Spear will grant you the Way of Spear skill that we saw before, and Rapid Techniques will grant you the Rapid Technique skills that we also saw before. So there you have it. That is everything that changed during the first build of Bullroarer. As you see, that's a lot to wrap our heads around, especially how will it affect the gameplay of the Warden. So I also took the time to do some testing, both on red line and on blue line, and compare it to how it works now on live. So for my DPS test, I went and got a training dummy and tested my DPS against this training dummy. I am not the best DPSer on the Warden. I have never really taken the time of playing with a rotation and optimizing my mastery usage, but I was very satisfied with the results that I got. You gotta keep in mind that I had just recently hit level 140, so my gear is just quest rewards. But even then, you will see that the DPS that I got on live, it's maybe once again not the best, but I think I got some pretty good results on this round of testing. So my first parse was for 190 damage per second. Once again, not much, but then I got to using, well, my debuffs, using all the Gambits, trying to optimize my masteries on the fly, using recklessness, and I was able to increase my results on the other as the testing with the dummy went on, something that right now is also inherent to the Warden gameplay. Since you have so many dots, you will start seeing truly how much damage you can do at the end of the parse. So for example, now you see I got almost 100,000 more. I got 283,000 damage per second, so that was a sizable increase. But then I fell a little bit behind, and my damage got reduced a little bit. But even then, without using as many Gambits on the third minute of the fight, you see I still got 230 DPS overall. So I would say, once again, for a Warden that it's only using quest rewards, and considering I only took advantage, really, I didn't take advantage of the last minute of the fight, I gotta say I'm very happy with what I got on live. Because now, if we take a look at the parts that I did on beta, my numbers went down undeniably. I tried many different rotations on this beta because, well, we are getting used to the new mechanics, the new Gambits, the new rotations, the advanced technique skills. So I was trying to try different ways of optimizing my damage. I, for example, did my first run against the dummy trying to build as much advanced technique as possible to use the skills later, and also doing the cash outs on the blitz and the damage over time effects. On my second round with the dummy, I tried to make as much space as I could for a droid maneuver and Warden's Triumph, but my DPS went down actually on that second round. And I guess it's very similar to what happens now on live, that using Warden's Triumph it's still not worth it. But maybe if this is tweaked on the next rounds of beta, there will be a place for Warden's Triumph on the rotation. Right now I still don't see, it's still not there yet, in my opinion. And something else that you gotta keep in mind is, with the new power rework, it's also really easy to run out of power in red line. So you gotta stop what you're doing to do some of your power restore, maybe use a power pot or two, and that also can hurt your DPS a little bit. And seeing as how my DPS had went down with these tests, I then went and the third round with a dummy, I just did a rotation very similar to what I did on live, and I got better results, better numbers with it. And that's something that also the vast majority of players was reporting, that there's still not much incentive to doing full Gambit chains, because the 2-length Gambits especially are not as strong, and being able to use your advanced technique skills still doesn't make up for the time you lose building it. But once again, maybe that will be fixed on live. Hopefully they will find that balance in not having all your Gambits do a stupid amount of damage, but still make them feel worthwhile using to build your advanced technique ticks. Because you will see, for example, here, the first round of parsing that I did without using a droid maneuver or Warden's Triumph or some of the other buffs, I just did 150,000 DPS. So I went down almost 100,000. And once again, some of it can be attributed to the fact that, well, we still gotta get acquainted with all the new stuff that we got and find the optimal way of using it. But the numbers are still going down on a DPS test. For example, on the second testing that I did, using a droid maneuver and Warden's Triumph as much as I could, my DPS went down, even as I told you, 130 DPS, and that wasn't supposed to happen, I believe. I mean, I was keeping up the damage boosts from a Warden's Triumph, especially using my advanced technique skills more, and also my marked and diminished targets, and still didn't went there. But then the last round I did, doing a rotation, not worrying too much about advanced technique and just trying to do as much damage as possible, I got 145,000 DPS. So yeah, I was struggling to get above 150,000. So once again, to conclude the comparison of the DPS parses, the numbers are going down on red, and I'm not sure how much of that is because, well, I simply haven't got used to the new rotations and the new skills. But, well, once again, we'll need to wait and see. However, on the other side of the line, tanking, well, blue line, the differences in beta are far more noticeable. I wasn't able to find a full group, so the best idea I could come up with was just trying to solo some instances on my own. And once again, since my gear is not that great, and since I have not tanked in quite a while, I went a little easy maybe. I tried to solo Den of Puglak at tier 2. But what you will see happened on live is that I died a couple times on the trash pulls. Yeah, I did end up pulling more mobs than I could, but even just fighting 3 or 4 of them at a time, I struggled a lot. Had to use a lot of my cell heals, Never Surrender, Defiant Challenge for the mitigations. The only thing I only used semi-consistently was for the free peoples, but you still can see my morale going up and down. The morale taps were a great help, but even then, I did struggle a bit with it. I had to be a little bit more careful, just fighting a few of them at the time. The Ukrush were really nasty with the wound effect that they apply onto you. And yeah, overall, that's the way in which I would describe my experience doing this on live. It was far more challenging. Maybe I'm not as familiar with the buffs we have on live right now. I did use a Shield Mastery and Conviction. Maybe I could have used a couple more buffs. But yeah, I did struggle a lot. I managed to get to the first boss, really. But I really couldn't do much to him. By the time he called the ads, that's when I went down. So I did struggle a lot with it on live. But then I did the exact same thing on Bullroarer, the exact same gear and everything, and I found out, well, thanks to the buffs now that we have now on Shield Zap, Ready Blade, Shield Mastery and Shield Tactics, I was able to take a lot more punishing. And something that I have not mentioned yet is that I have found building up to 3 advanced techniques easier on Blue Line, because the 3-lane Gambits, the 2 and 3-lane Gambits that you have on Blue Line seem more worth it than on Red Line, because, well, you are sacrificing some damage, but you are gaining lots of survivability. So there is a better argument for using those Gambits on Blue Line, and that in turn means that you can build more ticks of advanced technique to cash out on your different skills. And you also have way more advanced technique skills on Blue Line, meaning that you have a lot more versatility, and all that translated in more damage resistance, better self-heals, and in fact I was able to take bigger pulls than I did on live. It went a lot faster. Once again, the healing values are a little bit higher than they should, especially for Persevere. So that's something to keep in mind for the next round of beta. But I still found a Blue Line on beta more rewarding and easier to handle. It still has its challenges, of course, but you are more survivable, and that cannot be denied. For example, I once again made it to the first boss of Puglak on Blue Line. I was even able to handle the ads and take his health down to almost half. And then I got distracted and they got the best of me. But it's undeniable that Blue Line on Bullroarer was easier. Now, that was truly it for the first round of Bullroarer that we have last week. We gotta wait for the second round, see what new changes are introduced, adjustments to Gambits, damage, healing, and all the like. And especially something that we couldn't test on this round of beta is traceries. It's been confirmed we will be getting new traceries for tanking, which is a relief. The traceries that we have now are basically worthless for Blue Line. They are more useful for Red Line, so it seems there will be a lot of traceries replaced for tanking traceries, and it seems some of the DPS traceries will also get an update. And traceries also play a big part on our characters, so I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to see how much the new traceries will impact what we do now and the results that we got on beta. But the conclusion that I have now is Blue Line warding has gained a lot from this update, and it's only bound to improve, is my hope. Red Line maybe is not quite there yet, but for me personally, that's really not an issue at all. I always enjoyed Blue Warden more than Red Warden. In fact, this is just my opinion, but I think, well, Wardens were initially not intended to have DPS as their primary role. That was just an unintended side effect of the way in which the game evolved through the years, that Warden tanking was suddenly not as desirable, but there was a spot for the DPS Warden could bring to the table. and without us realizing, Warden became a DPS when it's supposed to be a tank. So I really don't mind the tank spec being stronger than the DPS spec. Maybe it does need some tinkering up to still be a competent DPS on many situations, but from what I've seen, it seems a Warden tank is on a really good spot, on the best spot it hasn't been for the past 10 years or so, and that for me is really exciting. So once again, that's it for the first round of Bullroarer. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, that you found it useful, informative, and once again, please let me know what you think about it. How do you think I can improve? This is the first time I do these kind of videos, and we have a new round of Bullroarer coming, so your feedback would really be appreciated. But this would be all for today, and I will see you on the next one. Until then, my friends, stay safe, take care, good luck to you all, and I will see you later.